When I was 16, my parents left town for a long weekend, the kind of rare trip they'd never take when we were kids. They were always the stay-at-home sort, so when they told me they were heading out, I half expected a parade. Instead, they dropped their bags in the hall, pecked us on the heads, and left us with strict instructions to lock up and behave. Me and my little brother Owen looked at each other and immediately understood what that meant. We had the house to ourselves. Owen was 10 at the time, full of energy and completely convinced staying up late would somehow make him taller. I agreed to keep him entertained. Movies, junk food, the least responsible older brother babysitter you can imagine. The house felt strange without Mom's humming in the kitchen or Dad's chair creaking in the living room. Still, it felt like freedom. Saturday night, we dragged the old inflatable pool out to the backyard. The garden lights flickered off as soon as the sun dipped, and our yard backed up to a thicket of oak and sycamore that turned black at night. Owen convinced me to go for a midnight swim. He splashed like a maniac, shrieking with joy, and I let him. For a while, it was the perfect stupid plan. Warm water, cheap sodas, the kind of reckless small-town fun you only get with a house to yourself. The pool sat right outside the big living room picture window. From the water, the house looked like a lit stage. Couches, the TV glow, a lamp in the corner. That window made me feel safer, like we were still connected to the inside, even while we floated outside under the stars. Owen was dawdling in the shallow end, telling me some exaggerated ghost story, and I was half listening when movement in the living room caught my eye. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, curtains shifting in a breeze, but then I saw a shadow, not a static blot, but an actual silhouette walking across the far wall, cutting through the framed photos like a dark hand. It moved slowly, methodically, disappearing down the hall toward the bedrooms. My chest dropped. I turned to Owen and kept my voice low. "Get out of the pool. Now." "Quiet." He nodded, eyes wide, and paddled to the pool house to hide like I told him. No lights, no noise. He was good at following orders when fear put him in motion. I slipped from the water, grabbed a towel, and eased the back door as silently as I could. Inside the kitchen, my house smelled the way it always did, lemon cleaner and coffee, but the normalcy made the sight of a crooked chair and a coffee mug on the counter feel louder than it should. Someone had been here, not just someone who'd moved through the place like they owned the air. I did what I thought any older brother would. I armed myself, not with bravado, with whatever was the most practical and within reach. I picked up the largest kitchen knife from the block, the same one my dad used to slice roast on Sundays. It felt ridiculous in my hand, and larger than I remembered. For a minute, I tried to imagine how a rational burglar would behave. Grab jewelry, head for electronics. But the small details told a different story. A dining chair pushed out, a framed picture cocked at a strange angle. These were almost petulant touches, like someone wanted the house to know they'd been there. I checked the whole first floor, living room, kitchen, pantry, laundry, doors locked, windows shut. No footsteps, no hiding places I could find. My heart thumped a stupid, loud rhythm against my ribs. I called the police. Better safe than sorry. When the cruiser rolled up, the officers were thorough. They swept the yard, checked the shrubs, ran fingers along windowsills. No signs of forced entry, no tracks in the grass. They were polite and professional and looked at me like adults look at kids who've had a bad dream. One officer suggested maybe whoever it was had slipped out before we noticed, or that we'd frightened them away. We barricaded Owen's bedroom with a dresser and turned the TV to a low channel. For the rest of the night, I lay awake, listening for anything. Floorboards, a muffled voice, the soft scuff of sneakers. Around 4 a.m., I heard it, the soft, unmistakable creak of steps on the upstairs hall. My throat closed, and adrenaline drilled through me. The kind of adrenaline that makes your hands shake and your thinking go fuzzy. I watched the door, knife on the nightstand, every muscle coiled. I listened as heavy footsteps moved above us, slow and deliberate, like someone crossing from one end of the house to the other. Then, the muted thump of steps descending. Whoever was up there was coming down, choosing exit routes, not trying to hide now. I waited until the last possible second. Then I slid from the bed and ran to the front hall. When I reached the front door, it was wide open. Cold night air smelled like damp earth and distant cars. My stomach flipped. Through the doorway, the street looked empty, the porch light doing nothing to the dark. Whoever had been upstairs had gone. I slammed the door, locked it, triple-checked the windows, and called the non-emergency line again. The police came back. More officers this time, with dogs and flashlights. They searched the block, asked neighbors, took notes. They were confident it was just some local trespasser. Burglars do weird things, they said, but the feeling of being personally watched wouldn't leave me. The next morning, the weirdness showed itself in small, unnerving ways. The knife block in the kitchen, the one I'd thought I'd left intact, had been rifled. A few of the smaller knives were gone. Not all of them. The big chef's blade was still there, the block bearing a crooked impression where the others had been. A cheap watch and some cash from a drawer were missing too, but it was the knives that gnawed at me. Why take small kitchen knives unless you wanted them? It was a detail that didn't fit a typical smash and grab. When my parents came home, their faces went from smiling to pale as I filled them in. They were angry, yes, but also oddly understanding, which made me feel less like a kid whining and more like someone describing something that might actually be important. The officers told us it was likely kids from town, fools out late looking for thrills. Maybe. That explanation makes sense on paper. It never felt right in my bones. Weeks later, I still catch myself staring at the knife block and imagining hands that know where every blade sits. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the kitchen late at night, I swear I can hear a whisper of movement upstairs, and I go cold. Owen stopped asking to sleep in the backyard after that. He didn't need to. He'd seen the look on my face when I told him what I'd seen move across the wall. He got the message. The strangest part was that we never found out exactly how whoever it was had gotten in. No broken window, no pried door, no footprints in the yard. It's as if someone walked through a house, rearranged a few things, took a few knives, and then vanished like they were part of the night itself. I tell the story now, and people laugh nervously or offer a dozen rational theories. I let them. I'll also admit that maybe they're right. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the fridge hums and the house creaks in the same old comforting ways, I look up at the hallway and feel the same small, tight dread I felt that night. Like a shadow has a memory of where it walked inside my house, and maybe it hasn't forgotten. This happened last spring during our campus festival, the big day everyone looks forward to, the one where the quad turns into carnivals, food trucks, and loud music. At my school, it's called Springfest, and people treat it like the best thing the semester has to offer. I'm a sophomore at Mapleton University, and like most of the campus, I stayed out late for the headliner. It's the kind of night where you don't pay attention to the clock until the lights go down and the after-parties start. Mapleton sits in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, the kind of place where you can walk at 2 a.m. and not feel like you're taking your life into your hands. That's why I didn't think twice when I left a friend's dorm and headed back to my building, Chestnut Hall. I expected the usual, a few other students roaming the halls, somebody playing guitar, someone else studying at 3 a.m. Nothing I hadn't seen before. What I didn't know was that earlier that night, a group of people had been circling campus. Friends later told me about posts on campus chat, masked figures riding bikes, knocking on doors, yelling. I'd missed those posts because my phone was dead and I was tired. I wish I hadn't. It was roughly 2:30 a.m. I swiped my card, went inside Chestnut, and headed for the stairs. That's when I froze. There was someone sitting in the lounge, normal, except he wore a black ski mask, not a medical mask. A real, covered face ski mask. He was just sitting there, dead still, like a prop on a couch. I stood near the doorway, watching, because my brain refused to accept it. People pull pranks, sure, but there was something off. The masked guy didn't twitch or shift. He wasn't scrolling on a phone. He sat like a statue. After a moment of that frozen feeling, he sprang up and turned toward me in one smooth motion. I didn't think. I ran. I ducked into the closest bathroom and locked the door like any rational person might, if they were suddenly starring in a horror movie. I let my breathing slow and listened. The building grew quiet, the kind of quiet that sounds louder than anything else. I stayed in there for several minutes, just waiting for the sound of the hall, but it stayed silent. My legs felt like jelly. Eventually, I cracked the door and peeked out. Hall empty. No masked figure. I figured he'd left. I tried to walk calmly toward the other exit, telling myself not to panic. That confidence lasted all of 3 steps. He was back. Same mask, same dead posture, sitting directly between me and the other door. His bike casually leaned against the wall like it belonged there. Someone had even wedged a chair in the doorframe, like they'd barricaded the way out on purpose. I had pepper spray on my lanyard, the little defense you're supposed to carry in college. I pulled it out and held it in front of me, more for the comfort of having it than because I thought I'd use it. He didn't react. He didn't move. He just let me walk past. It felt less like avoidance and more like performance, like he wanted me to see him, to know I'd seen him. I pushed the door open and left the building with every nerve on high alert. Halfway across Magnolia Street, I heard the thunk of tires. 3 bikes came up beside me. More masked figures, the same dark ski masks, weaving close enough to whisper if they wanted to. They shouted and laughed, nothing coherent, and a couple of them brandished what looked like guns. I say, looked like, because in that dim light, you never know for sure if they're real. Airsoft guns can look frighteningly authentic, but when something is pointed or waved around, the human brain doesn't do nuance. They didn't touch me. They didn't grab me. They rode inches away and circled, like predators testing the edges. I could feel the space around me shrinking. I texted a friend to meet me at the corner. My hands were shaking even though I told myself to keep them steady. The 3 bikers taunted me until my friend showed up. When he arrived, the masked group rode off, melting into the dark like they'd never been there. I didn't call campus police that night. I told myself later that maybe I should have, that I should have reported it immediately. I was shaken, sure, but not physically hurt. It felt like the kind of thing you tell your mom the next day over breakfast. Some weirdos rode bikes by me. That's what I did. I told her the story the next morning, and she pushed me to file a report. When I did, other people started texting me. Friends who'd had similar run-ins, students who'd been approached by groups of masked kids who'd waved guns and laughed. Campus police began taking it seriously when patterns started to show. The official theories were as practical as they come. Bored locals, pranksters, kids trying to scare people during Springfest. But the detail about the masks and the guns stuck with me. Why would pranksters bring mock guns? Why would anyone sit motionless in a common room, in a full ski mask, and let people walk by? The whole thing felt targeted in a way that didn't make sense, like someone tried to manufacture fear rather than take something. After that night, I stopped walking alone late at night. I noticed how small changes matter, taking a different route, never using my headphones, looking for groups instead of paths. It's a small habit, but it's been there ever since. A little caution stuffed into the seams of my routine. People offered explanations, staged intimidation, copycat behavior, social media fueled dares. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was a bunch of idiots trying to feel powerful for an hour. But I remember the way those masked faces sat in the lounge, how they didn't flinch when I stared at them, how a few of them casually raised something that might have been a weapon. That memory doesn't fit with kids being silly. It fits with being watched, and watched in a way that was deliberately meant to unsettle. I still walk back to Chestnut. I have classes there, but I don't walk alone like I used to. I don't let my guard drop, and every Springfest, when the quad fills up and the music starts, a little part of me waits, just in case those kids with the bikes decide to come back. 2 summers ago, I helped throw an end-of-season party at my friend Lena's parents' house. I didn't want to be the one in charge of everything, but she insisted. "It'll be fine," she said, and her parents were out of town anyway, which made the whole thing feel like permission. Lena's family home was that classic overbuilt suburban place, 3 stories, high ceilings, a long driveway, the kind of house where every room looks designed for someone else's Instagram. It was the obvious spot for a big gathering. The party filled the house and spilled into the yard. People came from the campus program, friends of friends, and a few locals, drinks, music, a pool full of half-hearted cannonballs, the usual. Mostly it was fine. Half the crowd was drunk, and the other half was loud enough that you forgot you were in someone's private space. But there was one guy who never felt right to me from the second he arrived. His name was Jonah. He had the sloppy confidence and a way of leaning too close to people when he talked. He kept positioning himself around Lena, not hiding the fact he was flirting. I didn't want to make a scene, so I tried to be genial. If he wanted to test his boundaries, fine. I'd play nice and let him tire himself out. I started buying him drinks and steering conversation his way, figuring a sloppy Jonah would either pass out or embarrass himself enough that Lena would lose interest. Call it petty. Maybe it was. By 11, he was slumped on the basement couch, as if the room had given up on him. He'd gotten loud and too friendly, then quiet and suddenly useless. I felt smug for a minute, until Lena pinned me with a look and accused me of engineering his downfall. I admitted I'd nudged the situation a little. We argued playfully for a second, and then she disappeared upstairs with a group to the pool area. I stayed behind in the basement because I liked the quieter vibe. People playing Madden and ping pong, a handful of real conversations still happening. I stepped outside for a breather. The driveway cooled under the stars, and the streetlight at the end of the lane gave the yard a small halo. On the edge of the property, in that dim wash of light, where the manicured lawn met the trees, I noticed a figure standing stock still. He wasn't moving toward me, he was just there. For a beat, I assumed he was another guest who got lost from the crowd. Something about the way he stood made me walk toward him. He was a man, mid-30s maybe, wearing an oversized jacket and a cap. He didn't smile when I approached. He looked at me straight on and asked, "Are your folks home?" The question came out flat. No preamble, no explanation. It was weird, not because someone asked it, but because of how he said it, like he expected me to say no. When I said they weren't, he nodded like that confirmed something for him, then turned and walked down the street without another word. He didn't get in a car. He didn't head to another house. He just disappeared into the dark, like he belonged there. I should have let it go, but the exchange left a bad taste in my mouth. I went back inside and tried to distract myself with a game of ping pong. A while later, someone rang the front doorbell. At a big party, you don't bat an eye at bells and knocks. People come and go. but something in the back of my head told me to check. Lena had asked that everyone use the back entrance because her parents preferred it that way. A front door knock meant someone hadn't followed the plan. I climbed the stairs, grateful I could chase the odd feeling away with noise. Passing Lena's room, I saw her sprawled on the bed, knocked out, which made my chest go tight. She'd been drinking hard. I switched her light off and then headed for the foyer. A girl whom I barely knew, half sloshed and giggling, opened the door. She told me an older man had been on the porch saying he was a family friend and needed to return something. She let him in without thinking. Every instinct I had screamed at me. I pushed past her and up the hall. The master suite told its own story in seconds. Drawers yanked open, jewelry boxes empty, the closet a mess. Whoever had come in had raided the room like they'd been paid to. My head spun. I assumed the guy had come and gone, taking what he wanted, but what I didn't expect was movement in the mirror on the back of the bedroom door. A quick shift, someone ducking away. I spun around, and the man was on me before I could form a sentence. He tackled me, pressed me down, and I choked on breath as his hands clawed for anything he could grab. It was chaos, too fast, and animal. I shoved and flailed, and the world narrowed to the smell of his jacket and the sound of wood hitting my shoulders. Somehow, I managed to shove him away. He scrambled up, dashed across the room, and dove through an open window onto the roof, landing with a heavy thud before disappearing into the side yard. I didn't chase. For one thing, I probably would have tripped running on a drunk adrenaline high. For another, something about the way he moved, practiced, like he'd done it before, told me getting closer wouldn't change much. I called the police, and then, embarrassed and furious, I walked the rooms and woke people up. The cops came, and the party disintegrated into shouts and flashlights. Officers pushed through, gathered statements, and eventually cleared the house. In the morning, Lena's parents returned early after someone told them about the break-in. They were furious in the way of people who are more annoyed about the inconvenience than terrified. They let the officers search and then shrugged off the lack of cameras or witnesses with that entitled air of, "It's a shame, but what do you expect?" They didn't want to press the issue hard, and their apathy felt like another punch. Later, the cops told us the suspect likely knew the family well enough to be confident they were away. Maybe he was a disgruntled acquaintance, a former employee, or someone with a loose connection to the neighborhood. I'll never know. The worst part wasn't the stolen cufflinks or the missing watch. It was how calm the guy was when I saw him on the drive, and how casually he walked away when I said the parents were home. He knew precisely what he needed to know. The night taught me a few things I didn't want to learn. First, people you let into a party without thinking can be far from harmless. Second, sometimes the danger isn't loud. It's the quiet person on the edge of the lawn who asks one definitive question and walks off like he owns the map. And finally, the hardest lesson. People will always surprise you, sometimes in ways that prove you didn't know them at all. Lena shrugged it off. She always did, and went on like nothing happened. That indifference cut deeper than the theft. It made me realize how little I knew about the people I'd been laughing with in the living room. I still think about that man sometimes, standing at the gate, asking about the parents, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. I picture him moving through houses like a shadow, polite and precise, collecting what he needs and leaving like he was never there.